The Human Black Project. No alien was meant to see. The signal that shouldn't exist. Dr. Elena Voss had spent 11 years listening to the sky, and in all that time, the sky had never once answered back. That changed on a Tuesday morning at 3:47 a.m., when the Deep Space Array at the Kestrel Basin Observatory picked up a signal that made no sense. It wasn't noise. It wasn't a pulsar, a satellite, or a glitch in the receiver. It was structured, deliberate, repeating every 11 seconds with a precision that no natural phenomenon could produce. And it was pointed, with uncomfortable accuracy, directly at a single coordinate on Earth's surface. A coordinate in the Nevada desert, 40 miles from anything marked on a civilian map. Elena flagged it to her supervisor, who flagged it to someone above him, and by sunrise, 3 unmarked vehicles were parked outside her apartment. She wasn't arrested. She wasn't even really asked. She was simply invited, in the way that leaves no room for a different answer, to continue her research somewhere else. That somewhere else was a facility that did not appear on any official registry. Its name, spoken only within reinforced concrete walls, was Project Threshold. 2. The facility beneath the salt flats. 300 feet below the cracked white surface of a long dry lake bed, Project Threshold hummed with a kind of silence that felt engineered, the low, constant thrum of climate control and generators, but no voices raised, no doors slammed. Everyone here had learned to be quiet a long time ago. Elena was given a badge, a windowless office, and a briefing that answered almost nothing. Project Threshold has existed for 31 years, said the man who introduced himself only as Director Ames. He had the weathered calm of someone who had stopped being surprised by anything a long time ago. Its purpose is simple to state and difficult to explain. We are building something that no living species besides ourselves was ever supposed to see. Building what? Elena asked. Ames didn't answer directly. Instead, he led her down a corridor lined with reinforced blast doors, each one requiring a separate biometric clearance, until they reached an observation deck overlooking a chamber the size of an aircraft hangar. At the center of it sat something Elena had no name for, a lattice of dark metal and pulsing light, roughly spherical, easily 40 feet across, humming with a frequency she could feel in her teeth before she could hear it. We call it the vessel, Ames said. It isn't a weapon. It isn't a ship, not in the way you're picturing. It's a message. A physical one. Built to be found. Found by whom? Ames finally looked at her directly. That's the part we don't fully understand yet. But something out there already noticed. That signal you picked up last night, it wasn't random. It was a response. 3. What the vessel was for. Over the following weeks, Elena pieced together fragments of a story that had been assembled in secrecy across 3 decades, spread through dozens of research divisions that never spoke to one another, each holding a single piece of a puzzle none of them were allowed to see whole. The vessel was not built to travel. It was built to broadcast, not through radio waves, but through something the physicists on site called a resonance field, a method of communication that didn't rely on light or sound but on manipulating the fabric of spacetime itself in small, deliberate ripples. Decades earlier, a research team studying anomalies in gravitational wave data had detected faint, structured distortions passing through the solar system, patterns too rhythmic to be natural, too faint to pinpoint a source. The conclusion, buried under layers of classification, was almost too large to comprehend. Something, somewhere beyond the edge of map space, was listening. And possibly, had been listening for a very long time. Project Threshold wasn't built to make first contact. It was built as an insurance policy, a way to send one message, once, only if humanity ever detected proof that we were not alone and needed to respond before we understood the risk of staying silent. That risk, Elena would soon learn, was the entire point. There's a working theory, a researcher named Priya told her one night in the near-empty commissary, her voice low even though the room was nearly deserted, that civilizations who reveal themselves too early, before they're ready, before they understand what's actually listening, don't survive the conversation. We found evidence of at least 2 other origin points for signals like the one you caught. Both went dark. Permanently. Dark how? Priya didn't answer that question either. Nobody at Threshold seemed to answer the questions that mattered most. 4. The night the signal changed. 6 weeks into her assignment, Elena was pulled from her bunk at 2 a.m. by an alarm she hadn't heard before. Not the fire alarm, not the containment breach alarm, but a third tone, low and insistent, that made every person in the corridor go pale and silent at once. She found Ames in the control room, staring at a bank of monitors with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not fear, exactly. Recognition. The signal's back, he said. But it's not the same pattern. On the main screen, a waveform pulsed, the same 11-second rhythm from before, but now nested inside it was a second layer of structure, finer, faster, almost fractal in complexity. Below it, a translation algorithm that had been running quietly for 3 decades was finally producing output for the first time in its history. Words. Or something close enough to words that the system was willing to render them as such. We have seen the vessel. We have seen what you built to hide from us. You were not supposed to know we were watching. Now we must decide what you are. The room went completely silent. Someone near the back of the room quietly began to pray. What does that mean? Elena asked. What we built to hide from them. I thought the vessel was meant to be found. Ames's jaw tightened. It was meant to be found on our terms. When we were ready to send it. Not observed mid-construction, incomplete, powered down, sitting in a hole in the ground for 3 decades while committees argued about whether to finish it. He turned to her, and for the first time, she saw something like guilt behind his composure. They didn't find a message, Dr. Voss. They found evidence that we've known we weren't alone for 31 years, and chose to hide, rather than answer. The choice. What followed was the longest 48 hours of Elena's life, though later she would struggle to describe most of it, a blur of emergency meetings, encrypted calls to people whose faces she never saw, and the slow, sick realization that nobody in the entire facility, not even Ames, had the authority to decide what happened next. The signal repeated every few hours, each iteration slightly different, as if something patient and enormous was refining its questions. Why did you build something to speak and then never speak? What do you fear? If we had not looked, would you ever have answered? That last one was the one that broke something open in the room. Elena watched 30-year veterans of the program, brilliant, disciplined people who had built their entire careers around secrecy, sit with a question none of them had ever let themselves ask honestly. On the second night, Elena did something that wasn't authorized and wasn't cleared and would likely end her career, if the world survived long enough for careers to matter. She walked into the control room, sat down at an auxiliary terminal Priya had shown her days earlier, and began typing a response into the resonance transmitter, not a report, not a diplomatic statement drafted by committee, but a plain, human answer. We were afraid. We built this because part of us hoped you existed, and part of us was terrified you did. We didn't finish it because we couldn't agree, among ourselves, on what kind of species we wanted you to meet. We are still deciding. We are sorry it took you finding us to make us admit that. She hit send before anyone could stop her. Ames appeared behind her a moment later, saw what she'd done, and, instead of the fury she expected, simply exhaled, long and slow, like a man setting down something heavy he'd been carrying for 31 years. Well, he said quietly, I suppose that's more honest than anything we would have written. 6. What came back? The response took 6 hours. 6 hours in which nobody in the facility slept, in which Elena sat in the observation deck staring at the dormant vessel below, wondering if she had just saved her species or ended it. When the signal finally arrived, it was different from anything before it, not layered with the strange fractal complexity, not clipped and interrogative. It was almost, Elena thought, gentle. Honesty is rare enough to notice. We have watched many worlds build vessels like yours. Most never send them. Some send lies instead. You are the first to send fear and call it what it was. We are not yet ready to meet you. Neither are you. But we will be watching for the day you finish what you started. Finish it honestly, and we will answer again. Then the signal stopped. Not faded. Stopped, cleanly, like a held breath finally released. The array fell silent, and for the first time in 6 weeks, it stayed that way. 7. Epilogue. 31 years, and counting. Project Threshold was not shut down. If anything, it was reborn, no longer a secret built to be hidden, but a project finally given a deadline, a purpose, and, for the first time, an audience that had made its patience explicit. Elena Voss was not fired for her unauthorized transmission. She was, to her own disbelief, made the project's new lead researcher, on the theory, voiced quietly by Ames in a meeting that included people whose names she still didn't know, that whatever came next needed someone willing to say the true thing instead of the careful one. The vessel sits beneath the salt flat still, no longer dormant. Construction resumed within a month, this time with a completion date attached to it, and for the first time in 31 years, nobody in the building argues about whether to finish it, only about how. Somewhere above the atmosphere, in a place no telescope has ever mapped, something enormous and ancient is waiting to see whether a young, frightened species can finish what it started. Honestly, this time. No alien was ever meant to see the human black project. But now that they have, humanity has finally been given the one thing 31 years of secrecy never managed to provide. A reason to finish it. End.